Yeah, well, because the weirdest thing about it is that I really got involved with the club last year. I've been in it since I was a freshman, but I really got involved last year. And one of the big things you do if you volunteer is that you go door to door every day and you knock doors, and then you go to all these events that have 100, 150 people, and you're all packed in this room, or you go to these dinners or whatever. And now it's like, okay, you can door knock, but you have to have a mask, and you have to, when you knock on the door, you have to back up like quite a ways to make sure you're not too close to people. And phone calls are a much bigger deal this year than they normally are because we're trying to be as careful as possible when communicating with people. So it's definitely a weird transition. Um, the club itself is also strange because I was in it for 2 years with two different chairmen, and both of them were able to have meetings in person, and it was a lot more of a, I guess, natural kind of feeling environment. And then I came in as chair about 2 weeks after COVID really started. So JMU was then online. So I've been on Zoom the entire time, but it's still, even though I've been doing it this whole time, feels weird. And I yearn for the day that I could be chair and actually have a meeting in person. So I hope that happens at some point, but it's unfortunate.
We're not entirely sure as to who's at home and who at home, be that wherever they live in Northern Virginia or elsewhere in the rest of the country or in the state, or if people are still living in Harrisonburg. So, very early on, obviously the Dems just kind of decided we were going to do everything virtually, and the only events that we were going to sanction in terms of organizing stuff were going to be virtual events. With very few exceptions. I think this weekend, actually, there's one local campaign in Harrisonburg that will be doing lit drops at doors. Like they're like not even knocking on doors. They're not even going to talk with people. There's just going to be some folks who are going to leave literature at the door. That is, from what I've heard, in stark contrast with how I've heard most Republicans have been canvassing. I read an article that said that I think it was the Trump campaign was claiming that they were knocking 1 million doors per week. I think that's somewhat across the country. I think that's somewhat of an inflated number, but it does speak to the fact that the Democratic and the Republican campaigns both take this virus very seriously, or take this virus. Uh, they both see this virus very differently, I should say, and take it to very different, take it seriously to very different degrees, I should say. That's what I was trying to say. But in terms of the specific events we have been doing, yeah, it's really just been partnering with like the state campaign, the state Democratic Party, and local campaigns, be they for congressional campaigns or in Harrisonburg, we have some very important city council campaigns. I'm really just co-hosting virtual events with them. And that's pretty much the extent of the events that we've been hosting.
Yeah, definitely for me, I think it could be for me, honestly, it's like gauging interest, because when you're on Zoom and you talk to people, everyone's muted except for you. So you don't get the natural reactions that people have to things you're saying. Whereas when you're in person, you might say something, you hear somebody groan, or somebody might laugh or something, and you can't really tell on Zoom, so you don't know if anybody actually cares what you're saying, or if they're just kind of sitting there like we do in class and are just kind of like, oh yeah, whatever, get on with it. Um, and and it's not, the weird thing about being online is that, and I've noticed this in classes, you don't have people, for some reason, are less likely to answer questions and like speak up, which is strange to me because I always thought it'd be backwards. But um, I definitely think, yeah, the biggest thing for me is definitely gauging interest of if people are having a good time or if they're just kind of sitting there like, I regret coming. This is boring, but I don't know. And then you also don't get, one of my favorite things about being in the club was you had the face-to-face interactions with people, and you got to be more personable with people. Um, at our meetings, we usually do the Pledge of Allegiance is one of the first things we do. And at the first meeting this year, I said, all right, everybody unmute. I didn't think about it. I just said, everybody unmute and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. And it was terrible because everybody was coming in at different points. So now we just have one person say it and we go along with the meeting. But it's strange. It's not the easiest thing ever, but we're figuring it out.
You know, what's fascinating is, you know, you would think people are at home and they're on their own and they've got nothing else to do. Um, if anything, like from what I've heard, not just, you know, within our organization, when it comes to uh, campaigning events, you know, we have great turnout at our general body meetings every Wednesday at 8. But we do. One thing I have heard is that there has been turnout issues at some of these campaigning events, and usually, you know, we'll have about anywhere from 2 to 5 members show up to some of the campaigning events that we'll be co-hosting with other organizations. So usually it's not 5 people who are at this event in total, but that's which is why I would think that it's been smart to partner with some of these other orgs. But it seems like people are just very exhausted, not just by the pandemic. I think this election has just been exhausting people. Speaking from personal experience, I'm fucking exhausted. I'm tired. This debate just put me in a tailspin, and I needed some time off. So I took yesterday, and I've taken most of, I certainly took last weekend, even before the debate, to take some time off because, you know, we kind of need it. This month is the crunch time, but every once in a while we do need a couple days off. And that's really, I guess if I had to summarize your question in one word, it's just burnout. People are burnt out from the past 4 years. We've done so much knocking doors, organizing phone calls that it's just people are just tired. Yeah. And it's almost to some people's benefit that if they weren't involved before, they're just super extra. Like those are the people, they're the fresh people that are just very, very ridiculously involved now. But yeah.
Yeah, so we do, like I mentioned, we do door knocking and make phone calls and stuff like that. But we also do other things. We've been putting up signs and delivering signs to people. So you'll have people that every year want to sign for the candidates, and somebody has to take them to them. And you know, when you work on a local campaign, you don't have the massive infrastructure that a national campaign would have. Like if you look at the Trump campaign versus like a state house campaign or something, it's going to be very different as far as who they have hired and everything. So college Republicans oftentimes are like almost the backbone of a lot of campaigns because we're the people that are like the boots on the ground, going out, talking to people, getting the message out, doing the voter contact that they need in order to win. The grassroots and the people on the ground are the ones who win elections. It's not really the TV ads you see all the time. Those are important, but it's also important that you actually have contact with people, which is why, once again, this year is weird because you won't have near the face-to-face contact that you normally have. And statistically, that's what gets people to go vote, is when they actually have a real conversation with a real person and it's not a bot on the phone or some faceless person on the phone that you're talking to and they called you at dinner time and you're annoyed. When you get somebody to come to your door, it's a lot more personal. So it's weird in that sense. But we're going to try our best to do what we always do and volunteer, and whatever the campaign needs, we try and be available for. So we try to put in a lot of work.
So what the little bit about the structure of, you know, the campaigns in the state. So when we're in a presidential election year, and especially in a federal election year, the state will sort of take over everything. So it makes it a lot easier for us to coordinate with both the Senate campaign and the congressional campaigns, because they basically just start running all the phone banks and they start running all the events and stuff. And, you know, we might do a phone bank with some of our members, but usually it just involves sending our members to already existing events, which in a lot of ways makes our lives a lot easier. I do have to say the one downside to that is oftentimes there are still like 20 different organizers on 20 different campaigns, all reaching out to us at the same time to be like, yo, send volunteers this way, send volunteers this way, send volunteers this way. So it's been a lot to deal with, but we've been trying to prioritize Virginia races as much as we can. So even though we can show up virtually to virtual events that might be happening for, campaign events in Arizona, we can make phone calls in Arizona if we really wanted to, which is probably going to be a lot swingier than Virginia. But, ultimately we are prioritizing Virginia races because we do have 2 congressional seats that we need to keep. There's one that we want to most certainly flip, that we've got a pretty good chance at flipping in the 5th. And we do want to organize as much as we possibly can for the 6th congressional district because, anything can happen. It's a tough district, but anything can happen. So we're excited to see someone like Nick Betts, who's our candidate in the 6th, do well and hopefully win that seat because Ben Klein is such a right-wing butt face. He constantly organizes Blue Lives Matter rallies, and he was part of the, I don't know if you were aware at the time of the impeachment proceedings, he was one of the congressmen who stormed the SCIF, which was that, it was the underground top secret committee hearing, which they were all invited to. All the Congress people were invited to it. They could go, but they, for some reason, had to make a big show. Yeah, anyway, so he was part of that group. We would love to see him not get reelected. But yeah, prioritizing Virginia races. And one last quick note, because I would be remiss to point it out again, the Harrisonburg City Council elections are very, 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 very important. Not only because local politics, yes, is very important. And we're students. We pay taxes in Harrisonburg to Harrisonburg City, so we deserve to have our voices heard. But there's also a QAnon Republican running for city council in Harrisonburg, and we would really like to not have that person win. So that's, in terms of that, again, we're doing, or I should say, local campaigns are doing lit drops this weekend. Our members do not have to go if they're not comfortable, but those are just some of the things that we're trying to do. Again, send our members to other campaign sanctioned events.
I think that it's weird because, like you said, this year is strange. There are a lot of concerns about being able to vote in person or about, voting by mail or absentee and everything. And there are concerns about legal ramifications for, if people fill out their ballot wrong or whatever. But from what I can tell, and, I've only been here for about a month and we haven't gotten to do a ton of voter contact stuff yet. But from what I've seen, people are probably more energized than ever, at least as far as I'm concerned now. I've been doing stuff with campaigns for 2 years. But, what I've seen both in the news and in my own personal interactions with people, there are a lot of people who've never voted that want to go vote. There are a lot of people who have voted once and want to go vote again. There are people that have voted one way that have decided they're not voting that way anymore. So I definitely think it'll be a high turnout election. Now, depends how you define turnout, because a lot of the turnout could be ballots being mailed in, or people voting, a month ahead of time. I plan to go vote tomorrow. So, and I would definitely urge people to do that, to vote early. But I think that there are people that are very interested in the election and they're very energized. And I hope that's reflected in November. I hope we don't get to November and turnout's down like 30% and all of us thinking it was going to be this huge deal is for nothing because nobody went to vote. That would be bad. But I don't think that's going to be the case.
One thing, your question, in terms of engagement, the hardest thing to do for us has been voter registration, because normally that's an in-person thing that we would do. We would be everywhere that we possibly can on campus. Usually what we were planning on doing is partnering with Duke's Vote and the Center for Civic Engagement. But obviously that's very difficult to do because we don't know if our members are at home, if they're in Harrisonburg, and if they're in Harrisonburg, if they're even comfortable getting involved with yeah, because it's been very hard, I should say. So in terms of engagement, that's been the hardest thing to do. I will say we have had a lot of people, especially after Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, who have wanted to do something. And we have had, I think, our total number of engagements, voter contacts, I should say, this semester is probably sitting around 2,000 voter contacts for our club. Most of that is text, which is that's not bad, but we have made I want to say it's about 200 phone calls as a club, which is okay. It's not it's okay, but yeah, as a whole, I do think again, I think in terms of the engagement, finding ways to do voter registration has been the hardest, and just making sure that people aren't burning out if they are heavily involved has been very important to check.